Before the ships came, before the treaties were signed in foreign languages, before borders carved the continent into pieces that never belonged together, there were thrones. And on some of those thrones sat women. Not beside kings, not behind curtains, not waiting to be spoken for, but ruling, commanding and deciding the fate of nations with a single word. They led armies into battle, negotiated with empires, removed rulers who failed their people, and held authority not as symbols, but as power. This isn't a legend. This isn't folklore. This is history that was quietly buried because the image of Africa that the world preferred never included queens. But long before colonizers arrived with maps and muskets, Africa already understood leadership. And sometimes, leadership wore a crown. This is Echoes of Africa. When many people picture pre-colonial Africa, they imagine kings, warriors, and men alone on a throne. It's a simple story. Too simple. Because across the continent, power wasn't owned by one person or one gender. Power was responsibility. Leadership meant service, protection, and accountability. And in many societies, women stood at the center of that system. Queen mothers advised rulers, priestesses guided spiritual law, and elders guarded succession.
The northern tribes are restless. You must move swiftly, my son.
The bloodline must remain pure.
Some kings could not be crowned without a woman's approval. And if a ruler became greedy, reckless, or weak, he could be removed. Not by rebellion, but by tradition, by law, by the very women who protected the throne.
There are no slaves in my kingdom.
Long before modern democracies spoke of checks and balances, parts of Africa already practiced them. Which is why the story of African power is incomplete without its queens.
Of power that will make a difference in my people's lives.
In the wide plains of Hausaland, a girl grew up differently. While others learned court manners, she trained with soldiers. Her name was Amina. She rode hard across open land, dust trailing behind her like smoke, studying formations, tactics, and the movement of troops. She didn't think like royalty. She thought like a general. When her brother, the ruler of Zazzau, died, uncertainty spread through the kingdom, and transitions of power invite enemies. But Amina didn't hesitate. She took the throne and then did something rare. She left the palace and marched. Drums beat across the savannah. Thousands of feet struck the earth. Metal caught the sunlight, and Amina rode at the front, not the back. Her army followed because she was capable, not because she wore a crown. City after city fell. Trade routes opened, markets filled, and wealth flowed inward. Her kingdom didn't just survive, it expanded. Wherever her forces secured new land, walls rose, massive fortifications carved into the earth, defenses stretching for miles. Some still stand today. They're still called Amina's Walls, physical proof that her reign was real. Not myth, not exaggeration. Built power, not inherited power. Amina ruled like momentum itself, unstoppable. Further south in Angola, another queen faced a different enemy, not rival kingdoms, but an empire, the Portuguese.
Nzinga, 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 Nzinga.
They arrived with ships, trade deals, and promises, but behind those promises were chains. Nzinga saw it clearly. Some wars aren't won with swords. They're won with dignity, strategy, and mind. During negotiations, Portuguese officials refused her a chair, forcing her to sit lower than them, a quiet message of submission. Nzinga refused. She ordered an attendant to kneel and calmly sat on their back like a throne, eye level and unbowed. Without shouting, she said everything. I kneel to no one. She signed treaties when they bought time and broke them when they threatened her people. She formed alliances, shifted loyalties, and played enemies against each other. And when diplomacy failed, she fought. Guerrilla strikes, ambushes, years of resistance through forests and hills. The Portuguese expected surrender. Instead, they found endurance. Even in old age, Nzinga commanded strategy, negotiated, and resisted. One woman delaying an empire through intelligence, patience, and absolute refusal to disappear. Then came 1900, Ghana, the Ashanti Empire. British pressure tightened like a fist as they demanded the golden stool. Not just gold, but the soul of the nation itself. To surrender it meant surrendering identity. Ashanti leaders gathered. They debated. They hesitated. Fear filled the room. Then one woman stood, Yaa Asantewaa, Queen Mother of Ejisu. If you men will not fight, then we, the women, will. It was not a speech. It was a decision. She rallied thousands, organized resistance, and led fighters herself, rifle in hand, at the front. The British expected compliance. They got defiance. The War of the Golden Stool shook them harder than expected. Even when defeat came, her courage did not fade. It became legend. Because some names don't disappear, they echo. And yet, even the strongest kingdoms could not hold forever. Cannons eventually outmatched spears. Treaties were signed under threat. Capitals were occupied. Royal courts, once alive with strategy and authority, grew quiet. One by one, the thrones fell. Not because these queens lacked courage, but because they were facing something the world had never seen before. Industrial warfare, global empires, and an enemy that did not fight only for land, but for control of history itself. Conquest was never just about territory. Territory can be reclaimed. What truly matters is memory. When the wars ended, something more deliberate began. Royal compounds were dismantled, sacred objects taken, regalia shipped overseas, drums silenced, languages discouraged, stories interrupted mid-sentence. It wasn't enough to defeat these kingdoms. They had to make it seem like they never existed. Queens were reduced to footnotes, military leaders labeled rebels. Advanced societies are described as tribes. Generations would learn about European monarchs but never hear of Amina, Nzinga, or Yaa Asantewaa. It was as if an entire civilization had been edited out of the record, as if greatness had never lived here, as if power had never worn African skin, as if women had never commanded armies. And over time, something even more dangerous happened. People began to believe it, because when history is taken from you long enough, you start to question whether you ever had one at all. But history doesn't disappear so easily. It survives in fragments, in whispers, in proverbs, in songs, in names passed down through generations. Now those fragments are rising again. Historians are digging deeper. Old manuscripts are being translated. Lost cities are being uncovered. Trade routes are being mapped. And royal bloodlines are being traced. And what they reveal changes everything. Organized governments, legal systems, diplomacy, international trade, architecture, universities, military strategy, art, science, civilization. And at the center of many of these systems were women, not symbols, not ornaments, but decision makers, strategists, kingmakers, king removers. Leadership was balanced, masculine strength and feminine wisdom, force and diplomacy working together. When that balance existed, kingdoms flourished. When it broke, instability followed. What would Africa look like today if that balance had never been disrupted? We may never fully know, but we do know this. True leadership is measured by what survives after you're gone. And their legacy survived everything. It lives in the resilience of African women today, in entrepreneurs, in activists, in mothers, in young girls growing up with quiet, unshakable confidence, even if they don't yet know where it comes from. The throne didn't vanish. it transformed. Because you can conquer a palace, but you cannot conquer an idea. You can burn a kingdom, but you cannot burn a legacy. And you can try to erase a queen from the record, but you cannot erase what she set in motion. Because once people remember who they were, they begin to reshape who they become. And sometimes power still wears a crown. If you value stories that restore truth and depth to African history, like the video and subscribe to Echoes of Africa.